can be both positive and negative. So Mateen brought up the idea of religion as a potential coping mechanism. So some people feel high levels of stress. They may cope with that stress through religious, right? Through religious outlets. But religion can also potentially be a negative, right? A negative source of coping. How so? How can religion be a negative source of coping?
It's related to perceptions of people. For example, what can I say? Positive imagination of God or negative.
There we go, right? It's very possible that people develop negative, right? Our own Chris Ellison, that very famous paper, The Dark Side of Religion.
Yeah.
Chris Ellison is one of the professors in our sociology department who's done really some of the earliest work on these issues. People that have a negative image of God may take that stress as a sign that they're doomed, right? God is doing these things to me. There's something wrong with me. God is kind of punishing me. And so we would expect that that image of God might lead to some negative, right? Some negative outcomes. So yes, yeah.
Or, and actually this was something we talked about in Markowski's religion class. If you're in religion and you have stress from life problems and then the religion doesn't help, it flips over.
Absolutely.
Well, how come God's not helping me out?
That's very plausible,
Grow,
right?
And then all of a sudden it flips.
Yeah, well, that's very plausible, right? Why is God abandoning me, right? Why are these things happening to me and not to other people? So we can see how within the context of coping, there's positive, there's negative, and then really most forms of coping can go in any direction. One of the big coping mechanisms that graduate students should use, none of you in this room because you're also kind, right, is what?
Drugs.
Oh,
I was going to say just getting irritable.
Maybe
going out and getting a drink.
Coping mechanisms?
Yeah.
Drinking.
Drinking, and maybe smoking weed, right? Now, something like Adderall, that's a prescribed medication for people with ADHD, and maybe that's the way they cope with it. But is there the potential to abuse? I'm the king of that shit, right? I mean, right? Adderall can be abused, like all of these other types of coping. But many people deal with coping through letting loose, through alcohol consumption. Now, pot, weed, that's almost a different animal. Let's stick with something like alcohol for one specific reason, is that it's legal, right? I know pot is legal in 5 or 6 states, but alcohol is legal throughout the country. And many people deal with stress and they cope through alcohol, right? That's been a staple of American society, where you get home after a long, hard day and you say, honey, make me a martini, right? So we have coped with levels of stress by the intake of alcohol. So clearly coping mechanisms, something like all of these that we've talked about, right? Taken to extremes can go in any direction. Coping mechanisms are not specific or particular to any one individual. Different individuals cope with stress in different ways. Now what's starting to happen in mental health work is that stresses are being specifically identified, again, to the social context that we live in. Read one of our, what is that? Goal striving stress. The book brings up the idea of goal striving stress. In a later chapter, they bring up the notion of goal striving stress. Hey, welcome. You tell us a little bit about goal striving stress, Reed. What does it mean? What is goal striving stress?
Basically stress from goal striving.
That's tautological, right?
Logical reasoning.
Why is it? Why is it raining? It's raining because water's falling from the sky.
Just having to do with seeking a certain station in society and maybe not being able to get there, and stress that comes from that.
Okay, sure. So you have the individual goal striving stress. It's sort of a model of stress that is based on the things that we want and the things that we're actually able to get. So you have the individual, and if the goals that we set for ourselves are like a target, right? We want this. That's our goal, right? Your goal, what are some goals that people might have? What are some goals that people might have for themselves?
For example, for me, getting an acceptance from any PhD program.
Well, don't say any, my friend. Say top PhD program, right?
Okay, Princeton.
All right.
There you go.
So is it a goal to get into Princeton?
Yeah.
Is that your goal? Is that your #1 PhD program?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. So let's say that somebody's goal, Mateen's goal, is to get into Princeton. And Princeton is right here, right? So goal striving stress is going to happen the closer, theoretically, if the conceptual model is correct, if the individual can get to Princeton, you will experience no stress because you have perfectly achieved your goal, right? But what might be right here? It's like, this is Princeton, but what is here? Okay, you're allowed to say Yale.
Maybe Colorado, yeah.
No, let
Baylor.
it's Baylor.
Not a bit.
Let's say that pretty
Notre
close.
Dame.
What's your second?
Notre Dame.
Okay, let's say Notre Dame is your second choice. Right? You did not achieve your primary goal. You're gonna achieve, along the way, it looks like you're achieving not the first goal that you wanted, right? A secondary goal. It's gonna give you a certain level of stress. But is that stress gonna be really, really bad? Can't get into Princeton, but you get to Notre Dame.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Not
it's
bad.
gonna be a moderate level
Mhm.
of stress. But what if it turns out that you can't get into Princeton, you can't get into Notre Dame? In fact, you send out 10 applications and you're having a hard time getting in at all, right? You're having a hard time getting into any PhD program at all. And then, my friend,
You're gone.
back to Turkey for you, my friend.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
This is the reality.
Because-
guys.
Because there's no PhD program that wants you, right? So you gotta go back to Turkey.
Yeah.
The only way you can stay in the United States is in a PhD program, right?
Mhm.
So not only did you not get into a PhD program, now you have to exit the United States. Now Turkey's beautiful, don't get me wrong. Turkey's a beautiful
When
country.
you go back, the pressure is there.
Then
You cannot get acceptance. Yeah.
Right.
Also have stress.
So goal striving stress in this case is huge, right?
There it is.
High levels of goal striving stress. And what's important to think about is the fact that all of this specific stress came from an external source, right? It came from striving to have a lot of things that are essentially difficult to get. So goal striving stress, so what kind of people might we think are going to be high on goal striving stress?
Alpha personality.
Tell me more. Alpha personalities. What do you mean by that?
Colloquialism. You know, the type of person that has to be in charge of everything, everywhere they go. Person that's always leading every
Okay.
endeavor of the group, has to be the boss.
You have lots of military.
Very competitive.
You have lots of military experience. Do you think in your observations and when you were in the military, there were people atop like that?
Yeah, I know all about alpha personality.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be an interesting way to think about it. I would suggest that if you're right, if your theory's right, Donald Trump probably has very high levels of gold, right?
Hillary Clinton.
And so would Hillary Clinton. Those would be two people with very high levels of goal striving
You don't
stress.
get to that level without being an alpha,
Interesting, right?
I think.
So we might suggest that on November 5th, somebody's goal striving stress is going to hit them really hard, right? Either Hillary or Donald Trump, and frankly, many of the people around them, okay? Now there's also a bigger, breaking this away from individuals, there's a much bigger social context, right? There's also a social context. Research in goal striving stress has looked at things like race and ethnicity, right? And has tried to make arguments about, look, Americans often have very similar goals that we strive for, right? We often, what are some of the things that we strive for? I mean, come on. We're not all Donald Trump. We're not all Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton. Those are very specific personality types that strive for like, oh my goodness, right? For being, well, hello, they strive to be president of the United States, like President Obama, George W. Bush. These are very high striving types of people. What does the average American strive for?
Good job.
How about a good job?
Financial
What else? Security, a good job, right?
House.
How about a home? What?
Us as a homeowner.
Be a homeowner, right? Just the average things that many of us strive for. Do we know that going back to this whole notion of an unfair society, the idea is that in an unfair society, many of these things that we strive for, the average person, it's a given we can't all strive to be president. It's actually almost a given that we can't all strive to get to Princeton, right? That's very, very select. I think you're going to get there, though.
I hope so.
You're going to get those pubs out, right? But the average person strives for the average things that are provided by society. But in an unfair society, those goals are not equally available, right? Those goals are not equally available to everyone. And they're not unequally available to certain people in certain racial ethnic groups. So for instance, who might have less access to the same goals that the rest of us have? So we all have the same goals, but we have less access to those goals. Poor Americans, right? Poor Americans may have less ability to attain the same goals that the rest of us have, right? African Americans, Hispanics, members of racial minorities. Therefore, we would expect, as some of this research has shown, that African Americans, Hispanics should have higher levels of goal-striving stress. What is really interesting is more recent research that has shown affluent, educated, highly educated, upwardly mobile African Americans and Hispanics to still have higher levels of goal-striving stress. Why? Why might that happen?
They're probably still facing more barriers than white people would be facing to attain those goals.
Yeah,
Like,
as
not blatant discrimination, but it's still there,
Yeah.
stigmatization in society.
as the argument would go, that would be the ticket, right? That persons of racial ethnic minority groups, even when they have higher levels of education, even when they have higher levels of status, occupational status and income, still experience greater levels of these types of strains and these types of stresses, based, right, on experiences of discrimination which members of other groups might not have. I saw that Matthew, my daughters blew me off to go to the movies yesterday, so to hell with them, I went by myself. And I saw that Matthew McConaughey movie,
Oh,
Free State of
Jones.
Jones. Anybody see that?
The White Savior.
What's that?
Is it the White Savior movie?
Of course, it's clearly a white savior movie. But, you know,
Yeah, I
it's-
remember
It's
that.
that one where he's Abraham Lincoln or something like that?
no, he was
That one about-
I've read about the real guy, and he was no Abraham Lincoln. If
I don't
anything,
know, I'm sorry, I don't.
yeah, no. The movie made him out to probably be nicer than he was. He was kind of a jerk. But the point is, it shows, right? It shows that even within communities of very poor Southerners during the Civil War, these are the poorest of the poor. The white people didn't own any slaves, right? But the runaway slaves were clearly still in a position where all of their aspirations were blocked. More so than poor rural whites, right? And that really sort of really comes through in the film. So these are the kind of ways that some of these mental health experts start to think about stress, the possibility of coping with stress, and also specific forms of stress. And I think the key to understand what we're trying to do here is to think about how this comes from external sources. So a good way, I think, for our public health students and the students in this class to think about this, you guys have all done this, but as is made